Well, good afternoon, everyone. We're obviously here to have the announcement of the new Director for Public Prosecutions. I thought I'd just speak very briefly about the process that led to this appointment, and then secondly speak about the person who has been appointed. That is, of course, Mr Joseph McGrath, who is standing to my left. I'll anticipate that you'll have potentially some questions for the new Director. You're probably more interested in talking to him than you are to me, or at least I hope. So after I've spoken about those two brief matters, I'll hand over to Joe McGrath, and he may just say something very briefly, and then you'll be open to ask any questions of Joe that you may wish. As to the process, we advertised nationally and internationally for a person to fill the position of Director of Public Prosecutions for Western Australia. We also had a targeted executive search that was undertaken by a private company, Watermark Search International. Applications were received. We empanelled 5 panellists, interview panellists. They were the Commissioner for the Public Sector Commissioner, the Northern Territory Director for Public Prosecutions, the President of the West Australian Bar Association, the Director General of the Department of the Attorney General, and fifthly, a partner of Watermark Search International, who, as I said, undertook a targeted executive search. That panel undertook a range of interviews, and they did so in contemplation of some very broad characteristics that I had earlier nominated, as I'm required to do under the Public Sector Management Act, as to what the government was seeking in a new appointment to the position of Director of Public Prosecutions. 3 candidates were shortlisted. One of those candidates who was shortlisted in the reports provided on him, that being Joe McGrath, certainly with respect to the specific characteristics that had been nominated, was outstanding. And that candidate, Joe McGrath, was recommended and approved by Cabinet, and this morning was approved into the position of Director of Public Prosecutions by the Governor of Western Australia. I'll just say a few very brief words about Joe McGrath. In fact, before I do that, I might just talk generally about the position of DPP. My view is that the position of Director of Public Prosecutions is probably one of the most difficult jobs in the state. You've got to find someone who is a talented and experienced criminal lawyer. They have to have a high reputation for ethical and sound judgment. They cannot just be a good lawyer, because the person in that position ends up managing a very large public sector office of in excess of 150 full-time employees. And perhaps even more difficult than just managing public servants, they end up having to manage lawyers. And I can say that that is not always the easiest thing in the world to do. So it is a very complicated and difficult position to fill. Joe McGrath has an extensive and varied background over 20 years practising law in this state. Originally graduating from the University of Western Australia with a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science and Economics, obtaining his law degree from the Australian National University, having 2 Masters of Laws, one from the University of Western Australia and one from the London School of Economics. Joe McGrath commenced his legal career in the very early 1990s as a solicitor at a very large national law firm known as Freehill, Hollingdale and Page. He was an associate to a federal court judge. Most of the experience after that occurred at the Commonwealth Director of Public Prosecutions Office, and that commenced in 1993 and led up to 2000 to 2001, where Joe McGrath was a Senior Assistant Director of the Commonwealth Director of Public Prosecutions in Perth. And from March 2001 to the present, Joe McGrath has been working as a barrister at Francisburg Chambers. Fortunately, he has decided to give away that profession for the time being and all of the financial accoutrements that come with it, and has determined to serve the public in the role of Director of Public Prosecutions. Just from a personal point of view, I might say that Joe McGrath is evidently a relatively young candidate as these positions go. He is experienced, talented, has a fantastic reputation as a lawyer in Western Australia. He is energetic. I understand that he is fighting fit, which he will need to be when he takes the reins of that office, because there is always much to do in managing an office of that side. And I'll say finally that he is obviously, Joe McGrath, an appointee from outside the WA Director of Public Prosecutions office. I'm sure that he will find that some challenges will accompany that fact, but also what it means is that Joe McGrath will bring, no doubt, a fresh way of looking at the way in which that office operates administratively, in the way it goes about its business, and that is an office which we continually expect to have higher levels of public service delivery set against a necessarily limited budget.